Ladies and gentlemen, would you kindly take your seats? We're exactly on time. And the reason we would like to begin as soon as possible, and I don't know if there's somebody outside rallying people in, is because Ambassador Verbo has a NATO meeting that you have to chair right now. Is that it? And that will mean that he has to leave us in about half an hour or so. What I thought I would do, if you were all in agreement on this very distinguished panel, is just to start with an initial conversation with each of our panelists. But because Ambassador Verbo has to leave early, I'll just take at the beginning, if you agree, just one or two others, and then open it for some questions, then come back and have an introductory discussion with the others, and then open up for a very interactive discussion. We're not going to be making speeches here, but at the start, just bringing out essential points that this distinguished panel wishes to note. Three small notes to all of you. When you want to speak, press the button, red button in front of you to activate the microphone, and kindly press it again to deactivate it. And always let us know your name and affiliation. Mobile phones for everyone here should be kept a good half a meter away from the microphone, otherwise there's interference, especially for people sitting there. Kindly, it makes bzzz, awful noise. Our session is called Afghanistan and its Neighbors, Regional Imperatives with Economic Security. So we are going to look at economic interdependence between Afghanistan, Pakistan, and other neighbors, the benefits and the difficulties and the challenges of economic cooperation and integration, and the really big difficulties economic security and other kinds of security are being posed to these states, the possibilities, and perhaps also, if you don't mind, gentlemen, the obstacles to regional integration, or the difficulties to be overcome, and the role of the international community as well in promoting it. To do this in alphabetical order, I have, they're all their excellencies. Her Excellency is Excellency Dr. Sham Bathija, who is Minister, Senior Advisor for Economic Affairs to the President of Afghanistan. Please raise your hand, sir. His Excellency Ambassador-Designate Munawar Saeed Bhatti. Ambassador Bhatti is Ambassador-Designate of Pakistan to Belgium, Luxembourg, and the EU, and you'll be taking up your position very, very shortly. His Excellency Ambassador Robert Blake, Jr., who's Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs of the United States. His Excellency Ambassador Jan Kubis, who's United Nations Special Representative for Afghanistan and the head of the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan known as UNAMA. His Excellency Ambassador Alexander Russell Verbo, who is a Deputy Secretary General of NATO, which, as you all know, is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And I will start directly with you, sir. To launch it and to bring in some of your key points, what progress has happened now in strengthening Afghanistan's own capacity to provide for their own security? Are we there? Are we getting there?
Well, first of all, let me say that it's a great pleasure to be here and be on such a distinguished panel, and I apologize for having to leave a little early. And I should start by noting I feel a special attachment today to Central Asia and to today's subject because I began my career as a lowly second secretary in our embassy in Moscow in the late 70s, and I was there when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and when that event rocked its relations with the West. And of course, when the Soviets withdrew in 1989, the logic of the Cold War led us to believe that we had won. And of course, the fall of the Berlin Wall then strengthened that belief. And so the world focused with great excitement on events in Europe, and the international community forgot about Afghanistan. And everybody knows what happened next. It became a failed state, a sanctuary for extremism and terrorism. with all the terrible consequences for the world and, of course, for the Afghan people. But today, let me start by affirming that NATO, as part of the international community, has learned the lessons of that period. We remain committed to Afghanistan and to helping the Afghans build a peaceful, stable, and prosperous future. And the prerequisite for this, of course, is security, and that's been NATO's core mission from the very start. It's been central to the transition strategy that we adopted at the Lisbon summit exactly 2 years ago. And so how are we doing? Well, first of all, I would say that NATO's own military efforts over now a decade have had a real impact. And certainly 2 decades of insurgency, civil war, and international neglect devastated Afghanistan and its capital. And it was this state of chaos that let the Taliban fill the void and come to power. But I would argue that their rise was neither natural nor inevitable. It was, in fact, an accident of history. And now, thanks to NATO's efforts and those of the Afghan security forces who are increasingly fighting in the lead, the Taliban are much weakened, scattered, demoralized. I genuinely believe that the notion that they could reconquer the country is not just dubious from a military perspective, but it fails to recognize how much Afghan society has changed since the dark days of the 1990s. Kabul is again a bustling metropolis. We see healthcare, education, and economic development that were unthinkable only 10 years ago. 8 million children in school, a third of them girls. So security has already produced these gains. But they're certainly not irreversible. But what makes me more optimistic about the future is that the Afghans themselves are becoming more and more able to secure their own country. Afghan security forces are in the lead in providing security for 3/4 of Afghanistan's population. In most of those areas, security is stable or it's improving. A year from now, the Afghans will be in the lead for security countrywide, although still backed up by ISAF. The recent increase in insider attacks, the green-on-blue attacks, has posed new challenges, ones that we and the Afghans are dealing with, but it has not called into question our goal, strategy, or timeline. By the end of 2014, there will be 352,000 well-trained Afghan security forces ready to take full security responsibility across the country. And finally, the international community is not going to repeat its mistakes of 20 years ago. Once the transition to full Afghan security responsibility is complete, ISAF's combat mission will end, but NATO's commitment to Afghanistan will continue. And as you know, last month our defense ministers approved the framework for a new NATO-led mission to train, advise, and assist the Afghan security forces post-2014. So this commitment is NATO's pledge to Afghanistan's future, and it's also a message to the Taliban that they shouldn't have any illusion that they can simply wait us out. So the strategy is on course, plenty of challenges, plenty of work to be done in terms of the quality, the readiness, the retention rates, the discipline of the Afghan security forces, but just today I saw a report that they are providing 90% of the troops in some major offensive operations against the Taliban in Uruzgan. It's just an example of the courage that they're already showing, and with 2 more years of effort, we're confident they can take full responsibility. It's the wider questions regarding Afghanistan, where there are more questions, which I know you'll have some other questions.
Indeed, and I think some of the other panelists here will come in on that. But let me just ask you one in this respect. The strengthening of this capacity to provide for their own security, what and how does that help the economic security issue, particularly outside of Kabul?
Well, clearly, security is the prerequisite to any serious and sustainable process of economic development, and certainly to attract significant outside investment, which Afghanistan desperately needs, but could indeed attract given its mineral wealth, oil reserves. So I think we're already heading in the right direction, and I think that with continued international support, Afghans can build on the security gains we've made. But of course, security is only one part of the problem. The international community has to continue to bear down in the commitments that they've made to provide reconstruction and development assistance that Afghanistan will need going, not only short term, but well into the next decade. We have to be realistic. This is a long-term project. But the pledges have been made, including at the Tokyo conference in July and the Kabul conference in June. So the Afghans must do their part, and that's where governance, anti-corruption, rule of law come in. Investors need to know that they have a stable legal environment in which to operate. And I would put great stress also on the 2014 elections. There has to be improvement in governance, a peaceful transfer of power to new leaders through credible elections, I think, for the international community and the Afghan people to have confidence. This is a country where you can do business and when you can look to the future with some confidence.
That is certainly an issue that we will explore and then open up to everyone. If you would all permit on the panel here, I'd like to get in a word from Afghanistan and Pakistan, that is Ambassador Bathija and Ambassador Bhatti, and then have a few questions to Ambassador Verbo before he leaves. Is that all right with the panelists? And come back, Ambassador Blake and Ambassador Kubis, is that all right with you? Excellent. Then Ambassador Bathija, let me just come back to you as Minister, as Senior Advisor for Economic Affairs to the President of Afghanistan. We just heard from the NATO point of view on security, but actually there is going to be a very big change in a few years, in 2 years or a little less, with more and more need for regional cooperation and perhaps even a shift away from dependence, not an entire shift, but a moving, the beginning of the process of a shift from dependence on aid. What kind of measures does this take? What kind of strategies and programs are you putting in place at this time to prepare for that?
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, since I'm taking the floor for the first time, let me extend my warm thanks and appreciation to the EastWest Institute for organizing such an event. Such an event provides an opportunity for academicians, policymakers, as well as those who have gone through a variety of experiences in their political careers in life to share experiences and build the issues accordingly. You know, the issue of regional cooperation is a key component of the Afghan government's economic strategy between now and 2024. We attach quite a bit of importance to it, not necessarily because of we need it, which we certainly do, but it has much, much wider implications. We take regional cooperation issues from the point of view of economic security, we take political security, as well as we also attach importance for the making Afghanistan as a trade, transit, transport, and investment hub, which will help the region itself, connecting Afghanistan as well as others. The measures, well, the Security Representative of NATO did talk about it. Naturally, we are prepared for the forces to leave. Afghanistan has defended since the history of the country ourselves, so we'll continue to do so today, tomorrow, and in the years to come. Nevertheless, it will cause us some difficulty at some point, but we are ready for it. Within the economic issues, we are ready now. The Tokyo Development Conference already committed themselves to us, as well as all the visitors, heads of states who come to our country has committed and has shown us their interest that they will be staying with us and stand by us and help us in any way we need. We, in terms of our own economic part of it, as you do know, Afghanistan has been privileged to have these natural resources, which we have started to little by little exploit it. Of course, it will take a little time, but the long-term future, I very much see that we will be able to benefit from it and then build our country. Mm-hmm. On this note, I must also say, since well, most of the colleagues and participants know what has happened in the past 30 years in Afghanistan, but very little you see the achievement and the progress which has happened in the past 10 years in Afghanistan. For example, we have built roads today more than we have built in the history of Afghanistan in the past 10 years. We had, way back in 1999, if I recall, 72,000 telephone lines. Today, almost every other house has a mobile phone. So that is sort of achievement. Connectivity has grown to the maximum extent, as well as our agricultural parts and so on.
And education.
And education, which, just to share with you one small experience, just last month I was somehow driving very early in the morning at around 6 o'clock. Here you see small children holding hands with their mothers going to primary school. Now, the schools have been utilized in a shifts level because the need and demand is such. You're talking about from age 7 years up to 10 o'clock, and beyond that there's another group, and another group until 9 p.m. in the night when a little bit older people are coming. So it's happening a lot. The demand in the youth in the universities, and when you talk to them, you don't hear much outside, you only hear a little bit, shooting and so on, but much is happening in Afghanistan, and that shows that we are getting slowly prepared to address and build our own country. At some point I'll be discussing more. I suppose we will have an occasion on our neighbors, our interests, development of our economy, our closer links, connectivity, business developments, which I'd
like to come back.
We will be coming back to.
Very much, Ambassador. I'd like to come back on implementation issues and human capacity development and on some on-the-ground things. But just for this first round, finish with Ambassador Bathija, a very small also, just a first glimpse so that we can get some questions before Ambassador Verbo leaves. Ambassador Bathija, who's Ambassador Designate of Pakistan to Belgium, Luxembourg, and the EU. From your side, from the view of Pakistan, how does it look, what you have just heard a little bit now, on the potential of Afghanistan? Is that going to become a reality? What is Pakistan's role in that? We'll start with this, and then I'll come back afterwards to some other questions, but maybe just a word from you on this.
Thank you, Chair. Let me first of all thank EastWest Institute for inviting me to join this session today, so early after my arrival over here. But I think before I come to your question, if you allow me, I'll say how we look on Afghanistan.
Yes. How
I
does
think
Pakistan
that will be much more
yes.
this important. From Pakistan, as a neighbor, Afghanistan, I would say it is one of the pivotal states. That is how we look on it. It's a very, very unique and a very close relationship between the two countries, which you can say it is both historical, civilizational, cultural, religious, linguistic, ethnic, and most importantly, it is people-to-people, this relationship. Even today, we have more than 3 million Afghans living in Pakistan, and we can say with a lot of pride that for the last more than 33 years, the people of Pakistan has kept their Afghan brethren as really their guests. We don't have any social tensions, we don't have any problem where we can say we have any conflict. There are more than 500,000 Afghan children who go to Pakistani schools, and they are treated as Pakistanis. More than 90% of Afghans who are looking for a health care overseas, they come to Pakistan. And in the government hospitals, they are treated as Pakistanis without any charges. If you go to Quetta, 50% of the patients in the hospitals, they are from Afghanistan. And in KPK, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, major hospitals, it's about 11%. Now, we look on Afghanistan as a critical. We look at the peace and security in Afghanistan as critical to peace and stability in Pakistan. And that is why the Foreign Minister of Pakistan has repeatedly said that for us, for Islamabad, Kabul is the most important capital in the world. And I think there's a history to that. If we go back, the poet-philosopher of Pakistan, Allama Muhammad Iqbal, in early 20th century, he had said that Afghanistan is the most critical to the stability in whole of Asia. If Afghanistan is stable, the whole Asia is stable. And we take it really very seriously. And I would say the president of Afghanistan, President Karzai, has put it most aptly when he said that Pakistan and Afghanistan relationship is like a co-giant twins, and that is really the fact, honestly. Coming to what the Ambassador Bathija has said, I think I agree with most of the things which he has said, honestly speaking, putting that way, because we see that there is already an important movement and improvement as far as the stability is concerned. Looking from a distance, it might look very difficult, and of course there are difficulties, but there is a movement, there is improvement. The only thing is that how we move forward to consolidate it, how we help Afghanistan, and how we help the Afghans, both in moral and in the material terms, to strengthen and consolidate all those things.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bathija, and above all, thank you for your understanding. To begin with just a few points, I'd like to come back afterwards of even the common challenges that both your countries face. There are some common ones, not only in the security area, but also in the economic. But before we do that, and because Ambassador Verbo has to leave, I will open the floor for 1 or 2 questions, particularly to him, and then afterwards we will come back and hear from Ambassador Kubis and Ambassador Blake. So I have Jim here and then over there. So both of you, can you put your microphone on and just introduce yourself, Jim, and then right behind you. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Jim Creighton. I'm the Chief of Staff for the EastWest Institute. It's great to hear about the forces in Uruzgan. I commanded that organization for a year, and the transition that the Australians are doing is tremendous. My question is addressed really to the panel, and that is that the transition of the military forces should be mirrored by an equivalent effort for education, health, and other ministries. And so how do you see the support of the ministries at the provincial and district level improving between now and 2014?
Improving in the
governance capacity of the ministries of health, education, and the other ministries at the provincial and district level.
I'll ask you just to take a few notes. I'm going to take a few questions and come back to you.
Hi, Fred Starr. I have a question for Ambassador Bhatti, but I wanted to ask it while Ambassador Verbo was still here and while Mr. Bathija is on the platform. Bluntly, when is Pakistan going to implement the Afghanistan-Pakistan Transport and Trade Agreement fully?
Any other questions while we just at this initial time? If not, we'll turn towards the three of you. And you've taken the questions. They're tough. Ambassador Verbo, let me start with you then. How would you like to comment on both of those, please?
Okay. I'll say a few words. I think others are maybe better positioned to give detailed answers. But on the first one, clearly, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and this is the impression of a distant observer, but I was just in Afghanistan with the NATO Council about 3 weeks ago. Clearly, governance at the regional level is lagging behind governance at the central government level, and the interaction between the center and the provinces obviously is still a work in progress. So I think that is going to be a key task for the Afghan authorities, not only over the next 2 years while the security transition is underway, but in the longer term, to ensure much more unity of effort between the center and the regions, and a better and more systematic approach to the allocation of resources. Clearly, Afghanistan is a country that has limited human capital. I think they would be the first to admit it, but I think that's where the international community can come in terms of continuing to stay the course with the broad range of training and assistance programs that it's undertaken, but with a particular focus on training a whole new generation of public administrators who can help fill this leadership, not vacuum, but address the deficit in strong leadership at the regional level and improve the interaction between the ministries in Kabul and the provinces. I really can't answer the second question, but maybe I'll just jump in before I leave to stress how important we at NATO view the question of a regional approach, the importance of regional support for Afghanistan as we look out over the next years and indeed into the decade of transformation. By working more closely together, Afghanistan and its neighbors clearly can do much better than acting separately to prevent the recreation of havens for terrorism and for other illegal activities like narcotics and human trafficking. So we very much support the efforts in the Heart of Asia process, the Istanbul process, to build more cooperation and understanding across regions. NATO, of course, has had its own regional partnerships with the Central Asian countries going back into the 90s, but they haven't been all that substantial over the years. But I think now is an opportunity for NATO and the countries of the region to see what more they can do beyond the helpful support NATO receives for transit, but to think about regional initiatives where NATO expertise coming out of our Partnership for Peace experience could be beneficial to the Central Asian region and, of course, to Afghanistan itself, in areas like border security, security sector reform, and deepening the work that we were already doing on counter-narcotics. And I do think that Pakistan is critical to the success of any regional effort. I was very pleased to hear what Ambassador Bhatti said, because it's essential that Pakistan be unequivocal in viewing stability and security in Afghanistan as being in its long-term interest, so that it can be all in terms of helping Afghanistan and the region to fulfill its enormous potential and ensuring that we're not working in any way at cross purposes.
Ambassador, before you do leave, let me get practical here for a moment. It's very expensive keeping up security forces and increasing even the reach for necessary, let's say, beyond the safe regions to make sure that it is. It costs a lot of money. I understand that just security forces, you know, some $4, $5, $6 billion a year, something in that range. After 2014, there's been some agreement at the Tokyo process, but how do you see it in NATO? You think the same level of intensity that you have now will continue, particularly when it comes to paying for all this?
Well, nothing can be taken for granted. I think that the political commitment that NATO and its partners in ISAF have demonstrated is still quite firm. We saw it at the Chicago summit. I think it's survived without too much erosion this complex summer that we faced with the insider attacks. So I don't buy some of the increasing gloom and doom we see on the editorial pages. But it does depend a lot on what the Afghans do to continue to generate the support that's required from our publics and parliaments at home. Sustaining the Afghan security forces is probably going to be about $4 billion a year just in terms of paying their salaries and funding some additional training. That's above and beyond the forces that we'll keep on the ground under this new mission. And of course, the price tag for the continued economic and development assistance is even greater. But I think the international community recognizes that it's invested a lot, that its long-term interests lie in finishing the job. And if the Afghan partners continue to make progress, I think that this will be a long-term partnership that will end up being a win-win for us, for Afghanistan, and for the region. So, but never take anything for granted.
Keep working at it. Ambassador, I'm looking at the clock, and we're around 3:15, so I know that you're going to have to lead. If there's one more question for Ambassador Verbo before he leaves, this is the moment for it. If not, Ambassador, do any of the panelists have a question for him? I think you've said it all then to them. They're satisfied with your answers, which we should never be, but you are. I'm going to pick up the question afterwards, if you don't mind, about when is Pakistan, when is Pakistan was really addressed to you, sir. When is Pakistan going to absolutely implement fully? We'll come back on that one. Won't do it right now, because I think it would be interesting for everyone if we brought in Ambassador Kubius and Ambassador Blake before, if you don't mind. And we fully understand that you have to leave, sir.
Thanks for the chance.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you very much. Let me start, Jan. Let me start with Ambassador Kubius, who is the UN, repeat, Special Representative for Afghanistan, and he heads the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. You have a regional mandate. How is that going to work out over the next few years? The post-Tokyo, as we keep saying, the post-Tokyo commitment, but also the post-2014 date. What are you going to be doing? What's going to happen then? Here, take a microphone there.
Right. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here. Indeed, although I was introduced as ambassador, currently I'm serving in the United Nations. We can
Once
be
an
called,
ambassador, always an ambassador, sir.
in general life, yes. In the UN universe, it's Mr.
So,
whether we like it or not. Speaking about what is happening now in Afghanistan, you mentioned yourself post-2014 Tokyo Mutual Implementation, Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework and issues, and indeed from the perspective of economic development, economic stability, security, this is extremely important to speak from a longer perspective. Mm-hmm. But I would like to make one point here. It is extremely crucial what we are doing here, or what Afghanistan is doing in this current period, because this is the time when, building on the achievements of the past 10 years, and they were mentioned, some of them, even in the economic and developmental area, we are building fundaments for post-2014 period. This is crucial. Some of the issues were mentioned, security transition. In the question we heard about the economic prerequisites, including education, health, etc. Political transition is the key. Security transition is somehow happening, and will be somehow happening, for a simple reason. The international military is leaving the country, full stop. Security transition is happening. Doesn't matter what. Political transition is on the track. We hope that it will happen in an orderly, well-managed way, managed by the Afghans. This is the first time in the 10 years period that the whole story is managed by the Afghans. And it will bring a new government that will be legitimate and accepted by the majority of the people of Afghanistan. That's the key for the future economic, social, security, stability, development, whatsoever you have. Without proper political transition, and I mean first of all change of the leadership, we can almost forget, not fully, but almost forget good perspectives immediately after 2014 period. We can almost forget good regional cooperation. There will be no legitimate partner on the side of Afghanistan in case there is no good political transition. Having said this, I would like to make a point that at this point of time, the developments are going in the right direction. For the first time, we have president of the country saying very clearly, I'm not a president one day after the expiration of my term, according to the constitution of the country. Since the beginning of this year, there were a multitude of questions, what is the intention of Mr. President and of the political ruling class currently in the country? And consistently and persistently in the span of the past 6 months, we have step by step a confirmation that Mr. President is serious about saying, I'm not going to stay. 100%, nothing is certain, Mr. Verbo said very clearly, because we will know more about the security and otherwise situation in the country at the end of the next year, 2013. The end of the next year will bring a measure of clarity that is necessary. Regional cooperation, that's another trend. So I said election is on the track. Things are happening. We have the election date, the 5th of April of the presidential election, because this is crucial. There might be discussions whether it's the best term or not, whether not to postpone it or not. But we have a fixed date of the election, the 5th of April. That's a major achievement, almost 2 years before the election, 1.5 years. Regional cooperation is another track that I would like to mention, then I will stop because there are many other things that are very important here. Regional cooperation, notably at this point of time, driven by so-called Heart of Asia Istanbul process. It's not the only driver of regional cooperation. There are many other formats, RECA, ECHO, etc. There are many organizations that are sub-regional organizations, but the Heart of Asia Istanbul process is a new kid on the block, and it's working rather well.
Let me just ask, does everybody know about the Heart of Asia process? Would you like him just to say a word about this? Go ahead, Ian.
It's the countries. Well, it started and received the name from a major summit conference in Istanbul in November last year, where perhaps the original ambition was much bigger. Perhaps the shape as designed, not necessarily only in Afghanistan, but in many other countries outside of Afghanistan, was slightly different. But what happened, the countries of the region, because they understand it's about them, it's about their fate, basically grabbed the leadership and ownership. And Afghanistan is showing the leadership. So what we have now is a regionally owned process led by Afghanistan, supported by a number of countries, like the United States, members of the European Union, and many others. But the lead is in the hands of Afghanistan, and countries like Pakistan, Iran, Central Asian countries, China, Russian Federation, Turkey, are very much owning the process. And this is I would say, a slightly new development. And they are moving very fast, given the fact that the whole process is old only 1 year. In the life of multilateral diplomacy, to see a development from the first conceiving conference to the next ministerial conference, 7 confidence-building measures areas already agreed upon, concrete working groups are working on them. It's extremely fast. So this is another good sign. I'll stop at that because there is a need to speak about Tokyo framework and Tokyo results, because they are crucial for the future of Afghanistan and for the development now, but also notably after the 2014.
Let's come back on Tokyo. Let me just turn first, if I could, to you, Ambassador Blake. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asia. So let's bring in Central Asia.
Sure.
Into this regional, and how does it relate to what we've been talking about in regional integration?
Well, first of all, let me add my own words of thanks to the EastWest Institute for inviting me here and to be part of this distinguished panel. I'd like to just first associate myself both with what Ambassador Vershbow, but also Ambassador Kubish said, that the United States is very much focused on these 3 important transitions that are going to occur in Afghanistan. The security transition that Ambassador Vershbow mentioned, the political transition that Ambassador Kubish mentioned, both of which are absolutely crucial to the future success of Afghanistan, but also to the economic transition that's going to occur. It's reasonable to assume that as NATO forces pull out, there's going to be a diminution in terms of military spending, which will have an impact on the Afghan economy. So we all have an interest now in helping Afghanistan to develop more of a private sector and trade-driven economy. Since the Afghan economy is relatively small, it's very important, therefore, to embed Afghanistan into its regional neighborhood, both into Central Asia, but also into Pakistan and India. And I think there's great interest in doing that. So the United States has been one of many countries that has supported the idea of dramatically increasing efforts to develop regional integration through the so-called New Silk Road historical trade routes idea, which means developing the railroads, the roads, the electricity transmission lines, the pipelines, to knit together this entire region through Afghanistan and Pakistan. And I think it's important to note that there's been some good progress on that. It's also very important, there have been several questions about transit trade. I think the transit trade issue is really crucial, and we can come back to that in the Q&A session. But again, I think this is going to also, this whole idea of regional integration is going to be another very important aspect of helping Afghanistan to prosper after 2014.
Before I leave you, just one word on what is it that they would look in Afghanistan and in Pakistan? What would they look to Central Asia exactly for other than energy?
Well, as you say, energy is the primary opportunity in the sense that there are both significant gas resources, particularly from Turkmenistan, and there's great interest in this Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, for which there's been some progress, but obviously much more needs to be done. But also electricity transmission. When you go to northern parts of Afghanistan, indeed many parts of Afghanistan, there's still many power shortages. Both Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan are providing significant amounts of electricity, but much more needs to be done there. One of the big projects on the anvil is the so-called CASA 1000 electricity transmission project that would bring surplus summer power from both Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan down to Afghanistan and Pakistan. But there are some issues there. But that's the primary thing. But I think Central Asia can also be an important transit point itself in the sense that China and other countries, Russia, are looking for transit routes through Afghanistan down to the Indian Ocean. And so they have a great interest, therefore, in building these rail lines that I talked about and developing further these road lines. So that can also be an important driver in this whole process.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. You turn off your microphone.
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to come back, and then please start thinking of the issues and the questions that you would like to ask. By the way, electricity cuts are also very current in Pakistan right now. There is a big energy need, Ambassador Bathija, a very large one. And besides this huge energy need, because you hope to have a regrowing economy, in the last years there's been a little bit of a slowdown and a contraction on inward investment, on energy development and electrical development. You do share, interestingly enough, some very common challenges with Afghanistan. One of them, of course, are the security concerns and terrorism that were evoked. And on the other side is the cooperation necessary with the regions in order to get the economy, let's say, moving again in the right direction. There's been a contraction in trade. There's been a contraction in inward investment. And there are real challenges, as we said, on electrification and industrialization needs. So I wanted to let you have the chance perhaps to say a word on these issues, as well as reply to the question that was posed on the implementation of the Afghanistan-Pakistan Pact.
Oh. Okay, thank you, Maria. I think first we start with the implementation thing. The agreement was to enter into force from 1st of February this year, but it could not, and it started in June this year. The implementation process always have its own problems, but we are happy that we are able to have this agreement, and finally we are in the process of implementing it. In fact, right now it's not only only the transit to Afghanistan. Pakistan and Afghanistan are also discussing that how we can include countries like Tajikistan with the whole this process. Because as we look on Afghanistan is, and if you look on the map, Afghanistan is a sort of a bridge between the Central Asia and with Pakistan and with the whole of South Asia. And then naturally, there'll be, because now when the problem started in Afghanistan in 30 years back, then we are still in Cold War. In the process, we already have the Central Asian republics. They are independent states and they're very thriving, and with all this, the energy resources and the markets also. And this is one area certainly which also we are looking at how we can implement it. Coming to the other question which you have said, of course, energy and security, they are the two big issues. Our assessment is, the Planning Commission of Pakistan, the assessment is that we are losing from 3 to 4% in GDP per year due to the war against terror and the security related things, which is a very common threat between the two countries. Last year, we were able to grow by 3.8%. And if you add that 3 to 4, then one can really see that how much difference it can make. We also have the other very serious problem, which is with the electricity, with energy. Now we have massive not only electricity, outages, we also have a problem with the natural gas also, because our own domestic resources, now they are coming at just a fake end. And that is how we are working with the TAPI, as Ambassador Rob has just mentioned about it. Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, the gas pipeline. We have done, as far as the paperwork is concerned, a lot of progress has been made, but obviously, ultimately, it depends on how the security situation in Afghanistan evolves, and we can start putting it on the ground. We are also working on, in fact, the gas pipeline, which is with Iran, because we really now feel very squeezed due to the energy deficiency. He also mentioned about this. He also mentioned about the CASA, which is that bringing down the electricity transmission lines from Central Asia. Currently, we are working with Tajikistan. And in the first instance, it will be about 1,000 megawatts coming down to Pakistan. But that, again, depends on how the situation in Afghanistan evolves. I mean, ultimately, if you look on this, everything is boiled down that how the security situation it evolves. We are able to come over that, as Ambassador Chris has just mentioned, talking about the political transition and then having the security situation improving, then of course it will be entirely a different situation which was there. We are keeping our fingers crossed, honestly, and looking on whole this thing, that how this integration takes place, and that certainly is going to make a win-win situation for all of us, because as far as we are concerned, we can't grow unless we have energy. And we don't have energy. We have to go somewhere. Central Asia is the one area where we have to go, and that we can't go unless the Afghan situation improves.
Well, that means that the two of you are going to be perhaps competing for the flowers to be thrown from Central Asia towards you, both of you. One other last, Ambassador Bathija, very quickly, one other last problem that is facing you. You are a net, if I understand correctly, you are a net contributor to diminish the food security issues that Afghanistan is going to be facing. Is that going to continue?
You see, if you just look on how the trade or economic relationship between the two countries is, that how it is working. In fact, if you look from a distance perspective, there are very many people who don't understand, in the first place, the depth of the relationship and the spread of the relationship. It's really very deep, and it's really very, very broad. I can say that when I said in the beginning that I agree with Ambassador Bathija what he is saying is there is a signs of some stability, but we need to have a lot of improvement, and that flows from this fact that today the situation is so that more than 50,000 Pakistanis, they are helping their Afghan brothers in Afghanistan in reconstruction projects. If there was nothing sort of a sign of a stability, then all those peoples probably would not have endeavored to going into Afghanistan. The Pakistan and Afghanistan trade in 2001, we were exporting only 26 million worth of the commodities to Afghanistan. Last year, our total bilateral trade was $2.5 billion, and Pakistani exports were $2.3 billion. Now, that way, Afghanistan for us becomes the largest market after the US and China. So you can well imagine that how the close and the big this the relationship is. And of course, this the food we are, Pakistan we are self-sufficient as far as the production of wheat, which is a staple food both for Afghanistan and Pakistan is concerned. And we are a major exporter of the rice in any way basmati rice is concerned. Therefore, it's a very natural market forces where we do export the food stuff and all these things. And if I understand very well that the Pakistani the flour is very popular in Afghanistan. Thank you.
You have a very short question, because then I'd like to turn to Ambassador Bathija.
I'm sorry to bother you, but you used the word process 4 times in responding to my question of when will you fully implement the Afghanistan-Pakistan Transit and Trade Agreement. That suggests an endless process stretching indefinitely into the future. Can you tell us when you will fully implement this agreement which your government has signed?
I haven't understood fully what you mean by the fully implementing. I said that it was to enter into force from February this year, but it entered in June this year. We are already implementing it. I don't know what you mean by the fully implementing it. What I mentioned about the process was that even if you have a normal trade sort of a thing, the people always negotiate with this. That's the one thing which I was just mentioning as far as the process is concerned. And when you start implementing things, it always happens you have the teething problems, which the people continue to deal with that. As far as the government is concerned, as far as its theoretical implementation is concerned, it's final, it is in force, it is being implemented. I hope that satisfies your question.
We're going to move on from there, and I'm going to ask Ambassador Bathija now if he would take us one step further. We've discussed this enormous reliance they have on regional cooperation in the area for some very vital aspects. One is security. Another is electricity. A third is energy. Obviously now we've also talked about food. So there are many others, and these are key ones in which they need to rely, the countries of the region have to be and will be relying on each other. India isn't here, but also India comes into this. Iran isn't up here, but also Iran and Central Asia. Now, you'd like to make a remark about, okay, about India's role. Go right ahead, and then I'll turn to you, Ambassador Bathija.
I just wanted to pick up on what Ambassador Bhatti said about some of the energy needs in Pakistan, but also just India's larger role, because I think it's important. I didn't want to only focus on Central Asia.
Oh, okay.
I mean, India, I think, has a crucial role to play in not only now, and already is playing a crucial role, but particularly after 2014. India has a very substantial assistance program that's already underway in terms of about a $2 billion package that it's now implementing. It's taken some very important investments in Afghanistan that's kind of leading the way in terms of private sector investment, particularly in the Hajigak iron ore deposit, which is going to be a very, very substantial investment. But I think even more importantly, perhaps for Afghanistan's future and the region's future, will be the trade and the transit trade. India is going to be, by various estimates, the 3rd largest economy in the world in about 15 years, and therefore will be kind of the economic anchor for this whole region. And so opening up all of these transit trade routes is going to be critically important. India and Pakistan are making bilateral progress now, which has been very, very welcome. And as a result of that, Pakistan is expected to grant most favored nation status to India by the end of this year, which could open up potentially the opportunity for approximately $10 billion in bilateral trade. The next logical step would then be to think about transit trade, India joining the Afghanistan-Pakistan Transit Trade Agreement. And indeed, President Karzai was visiting India today and talked about that in a state visit with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, that Afghanistan obviously would welcome India's participation, because that would, again, allow for much greater transit and trade between the region. Just one more point, which is the energy side. One of the interesting new developments in Indo-Pakistani trade is the possibility now of energy trade between the two countries. President Zardari was recently in the Gulf talking about buying more gas, and the idea would be to build a pipeline through India to take advantage of India's refining capacity and then have that go into to Pakistan, which would be another very welcome step in their bilateral relations, but would also help significantly in terms of addressing some of the energy shortages inside Pakistan.
Mr. Blake, look, we've heard some of the hopeful and good stories, some of the areas that everyone is pushing towards. I'd like now to move to some of the obstacles that need to be overcome. Ambassador Bathija, I think that obviously both countries represented here have a lot of obstacles. But what I would like particularly to look at with you is how you are looking, how you are arranging, if you wish, the next step in implementation. You know, plans are excellent, you have told me, talking together, meetings, strategy. But when the action is needed, it cannot be overnight. Implementation is always an obstacle. How do you see the human capacity and the implementation of all of these things we've been talking about rolling out over the next years?
Thank you. If you would have asked me this question in 1999, I would have stood up and walked out of this room because I would not have much answer for it. That day's capacity and today's capacity has gone beyond, one would think, for a country which has gone for 30 years of conflict, and which the whole social, economic, and institutional fabric was sort of destroyed in that. And we have to rebuild it. In our presence today, we have Ambassador Maroufi, who was telling me a story when he was called to go to Afghanistan. He stayed in Kabul hotel, but he has to make a hot water with the 2 electric wires. That was the day, and he's sitting right here. From that day to today, let me take you to answer this question, because it will be great for all of you to know what is going on in the cabinet itself, what kind of issues we are dealing with the capacity building. We have gone beyond what normal is a country like least developed country, landlocked, conflict-affected country Afghanistan was. We have gone through some stages of development. In the past 10 years, as I said, you may or you may not hear, but a lot has happened. We never had a private university. Today, the cabinet last month took over a law to say how to regulate the private universities. So it's that much what has gone for it. We have gone in the South Asia. I think Afghanistan will be the only country which will have a electronic national ID, we call it, which will basically present the card, and which will read in this biometric, chip, everything else.
You're doing what India has launched.
Well, we are doing it, and then we're going to use
for so many years.
Right, but we are using it now in the next elections, for example. We are planning to do that. We have 30% of the women in the parliament today. It's by law we are required to have it. And many other things which I can quote a book of it, for example, what happens. So these are the old capacities which we have developed, and we continue to develop. After all, we are still in the bottom of the list. It's not that we have achieved everything else, but we have started on a great path. We have today, for example, in the sectors which somehow was asked, Afghanistan today is setting up the railroad network, which I'm responsible to set up some sort of institutional mechanism for it. We never had it. It's a mountainous country. It's not easy. It costs billions of dollars for it in order to exploit our natural resources, iron and plus many others, for example. That we are working on it. In the health sector, when you asked this question, what we didn't have today, I think Mr. Malik may be able to say more words on that. We have not met the health-related MDG4, but we are, I think Afghanistan has become one of the top achievers. So that also has the way it's done is. Education, as I said, millions and millions of children are going to school. And it will all end of the day, we are on the right path.
But is it fast enough?
Well, I think in the past 10 years...
my question is really, is it deep enough and fast enough to support a new kind of economy which will not so much depend on foreign aid and assistance as on homegrown investment and wealth creation?
Well, let me stop you right there. There is a need for a foreign investment, for which I must put it on the record, thanks to our international donor community, which has provided us to this stage. Any LDC needs ODA, Official Development Assistance. We cannot say that we would not need it. We will continue to be needing all the assistance, and the Tokyo Development Cooperation had already said that, and the commitment is there. But how fast? I think in the past 10 years, given my own experience that I've dealt with the 50 countries, I think Afghanistan has gone very fast in the past 10 years, the amount of achievements that we have done it. But much more to do, much more we will continue to do so. On the transit issues, Ambassador has very rightly said so. Just, matter of fact, if I recall, 3 months ago, there was a proposal that Pakistan is going to buy electricity from our Central Asian neighbors. Will Afghanistan facilitate that? It took 5 minutes to say, yes, sir, we will do so. One of our finance minister guys said, he said, are we going to get some transit fees for that? I hope we will. But I mean, that kind of regional cooperation and closeness is getting there.
Regional cooperation doesn't mean that you don't make money off of it. Just that you facilitate that it happens in a good way.
Right. And of course, Ambassador Blake already highlighted the TAPI and the CASA 1000 and other projects. The regional cooperation doesn't have to be only in one trade area. It's almost every single area in water resources, which I suppose one day it may happen that we'll all sit down together and solve some of the issues in the transit, in investments, in you just name it, we can cooperate on that part. But coming back to what are the steps for, say, years to come now. Naturally, I cannot say that we are great, we have done everything successfully and so on. We lay quite a bit. One of my biggest problems, which I'm promoting and I've put in the proposal, is our villages are basically coming to the towns now, the people. Kabul today, for example, used to be a 1 million inhabitant city. Now today is 5 million. Why so? Because the jobs and has not been created in those areas. So we got to make the best out of our capacity which we have, agriculture. One of the things which Afghanistan does not need any help other than technical assistance help is in the agricultural area. We have enough water, we have enough human capacity, the farming and the farmers which are there, and we have enough land. All we have to do is to focus a little bit on the agricultural part, plus we have to add the industries which supports our value-added part of it. For example, agricultural agro-based industries, for example, which will create jobs in those local communities, create yet industry, and we'll slowly we'll build up our own industrial base as well. This is one of the areas we are working on it. As a matter of fact, our Minister of Rural Development will be in town, for example, and one of the issues that he's pursuing that within the same framework. So we are doing quite a bit. We have our national budgets now literally include the infrastructure projects, particularly building the dams, which will have all kind of effects and so on. So we are doing it quite a bit in that way, and hopefully continue to do so.
Thank you very much. Could you turn your microphone over there? Now I'm going to turn towards you and open up for some questions to all of the panelists. I have 2 over here, and I'm not going to let you gentlemen off here in the front. I'll call in you, Ambassador. All right, we'll start at the back. You put your hands up first. This gentleman here, and then that one there, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Sibal.
Okay, thank you.
Please give us your name and affiliation, and please keep mobile phones away from microphones that are on.
My name is Răzvan Roșu. I am currently conducting a research on EU foreign policy on Central Asia, especially Turkmenistan. But my question is concerning economic security and especially the TAPI project. How viable is that project in terms of the physical maintenance of security of the gas pipeline, going especially through the Afghan and Pakistan territory? And is this project going to be assured in terms of security also with the help of external action, external actors? Will India or Pakistan accept counseling or even, I don't know, physical help in terms of that? Because a gas pipeline seems like a good target for a terrorist attack that aims at destabilizing political context. Thank you.
Yes? Okay. Unib Rashid, correspondent, Jung Group of Newspapers, Pakistan. my questions to all of panelists that what is the next political agenda about Afghanistan? The things that you mentioned, Mr.
My name is Kamal Sibula, member of the EastWest Institute Board. My question is addressed to Ambassador Blake. My impression was that Russia was not very enthusiastic about the new Silk Road project. And generally, U.S. strategy of linking South Asia with Central Asia more and more. But you said just now in your remarks that in terms of developing this region and making investments in the region, the process will be driven by China and Russia looking for access to the Indian Ocean. So is there now a change in Russian thinking about the new Silk Road project, about linkage between South and Central Asia? Or is it that they now think this is inevitable and they should have some share of the contracts? Is it only in the transactional sense in terms of winning some contracts? Or is there now a political decision that they must try to position themselves in this area also politically? And would that then be connected with some overtures that have been made by Russia lately to Pakistan?
May I add to that question from you? Also, has Russia's, or let's put it the other way, has Afghanistan's relationship with Russia undergone, from their point of view and their perception, any changes?
Let me also supplement this because you mentioned China too. China already has the Karakoram Highway and building the Gwadar port. So if they want to drive the process of investment in this region, they have an outlet potentially to the Indian Ocean. So is there another dimension of China's interest in access to the Indian Ocean which is not so visible yet?
Very interesting. Would you like to make a comment or pose a question, sir?
Thank you very much, Madam. I have not asked for the floor, but through your eyes communication, yes. I would like to seek some clarification. To me, the first thing is, I guess this is what is in the mind of many Afghans. We have learned all this about this process and when is it going to be delivered and how it is going to happen and all that. But we have not moved any further on that. Let's see, from the time of Chicago to present, we must have moved on some areas where that could give us the assurance that we are moving. Now, there is also on the economic front. The point is, how much, when are the Afghans going to be okay? Afghans will be in charge of their security. When are they going to be in charge of their purse? For the international assistance for reconstruction, that's a very big question. If we continue the way we are continuing, this money will also be evaporated, and I don't think we will reach the objectives that are set for achieving reconstruction goals. So I guess that's on the regional cooperation. Of course, this is also not very sure. Regional cooperation, again, we have not moved very tangibly on the regional cooperation by citing things that this has achieved, this is achieved, this is achieved. We are still saying that this is a desirous stages, but we still don't know. Like say on transit to the others, there are many other options that Afghanistan can utilize. There is the train line, which is not yet started. We are still at the very initial stage of feasibility study. There's no international assistance from anywhere coming through to say, okay, well, let's start with this project to take some steps. There's not that. And whenever we speak of any international assistance or that, we go back to the stereotype answer, which is developed from Tokyo, pinned to this and this and this and this and this. And is there any process to say that this list of that the government should be doing, this is now only 4 is removed and we are at the 3rd, we are at the 4th. I think that's what I call progress, not a repetition of what has already been there, and we know about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Are there any more questions at this time? I'll come back again to you, but perhaps we can take a bite at some of these. Who would like to start off? I'm looking at you, Ambassador Blake. Would you like to?
It seems that I have to sing for my supper quite a lot this
You're
day.
going to have to,
And I
about
didn't even get supper.
pipeline and insured security on it and so on.
Let me first answer the question about TAPI that the gentleman asked about and how viable that is. I think our sense is that it is a viable project. I mean, first of all, it's viable because there's an important market now. You have to ask yourself, what's the difference between now and 10 years ago when this project was also being considered? And I think the major difference is that is India, and the fact that India has now a very rapidly expanding economy that has a great appetite for energy that will continue for the foreseeable future. And they would certainly like to be able to import more gas as part of that energy mix. So I think there is the sort of commercial viability of this is very, very important. You asked about security. It's interesting. In most of the talks that I've had with officials over the years and with the companies, security doesn't really come up that much. People are not that worried about the security side. They're more worried about making sure that this is going to be commercially viable and that the proper incentives are in place for whoever's going to lead this consortium to derive sufficient revenues for it. So where we are now, I think, is that the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, arranged for a roadshow this past September that went to a number of capitals and talked to a wide range of investors and companies and so forth. So they're now evaluating the results of that roadshow to see who might be encouraged to form a consortium, and what would be the appropriate mix of incentives to make that a viable project. And again, you have to talk to the Turkmen directly about that. Do you want me to answer the other questions as well, or?
I will ask, but could you close your microphone just a minute, because I was told we have to open and close them. Does anyone else want to say something about the pipeline? Just the pipeline? Okay.
Yes. I think, Ambassador Blake, you were right on the security issue. One of the little obstacle was India, the price of the gas itself. But what I understand now is India has agreed to it, and I think that will move the process very fast.
Let's also not forget that it takes a very long time to build these pipelines. So it's not even with agreement and with financing in place, it still takes a very long time. Ambassador Blake, would you like to look at some of the others?
Ambassador Sybil asked about the question of Russia and what is Russia's interest in the so-called New Silk Road. And my response is that they're not terribly enthusiastic about the title, but I think they are interested in the concept. They prefer to call it historical trade routes. And, first of all, the Russians share all of our objectives in ensuring a successful transition in Afghanistan. They've worked very closely with NATO and with us and others on working on all these various transit routes through Central Asia. And again, I think they support the idea of increasing trade and so forth to help Afghanistan. And I think Russia and most of the other countries of the region have embraced the concept of regional integration. As many of you know, there was a very important conference that took place in Tajikistan in March, the so-called RECA conference, the Regional Economic Cooperation Conference on Afghanistan, where all of the countries of the region and the wider region embrace this idea of regional integration and specifically endorsed a 17-point plan on how to develop that. Not only these various projects that we've already talked about, but also sort of the software of how do you, for example...
Ambassador, let me just ask you right there, just
Yeah.
to add something to this. They embraced it, but is action taking place?
Yeah, indeed. That's a whole another separate long answer. But let me just finish this question first, which is the Russian one. You know, and again, I think the Russians do want to help. They were all part of this RECA conference and this RECA process, and you know, so in general, they do see that there's a role for them, and that they can benefit from this, but that this is a much wider process. And it's not just Russia. It's Russia, China, Turkey, the EU. All of these countries have an interest in this. And again, if you look at a map, Afghanistan and Pakistan are sort of right at the center of this, and so they can benefit a great deal from this. There was also a question about China and the Karakoram Highway. The Karakoram Highway, of course, doesn't carry much in the way of goods. I mean, it's still a relatively small artery. And so I think there would be interest on the part of the Chinese to develop rail lines from China through Central Asia and then again down. And I think many of the other countries of the region would benefit as well. Kazakhstan, for example, is quite interested, and that's why they've been helping to finance a rail line through Turkmenistan that would go into Afghanistan as well, and then eventually connect up to the Indian Ocean. So again, this is another example of where Afghanistan can benefit a great deal.
Any other questions that you wanted to pick up while you were at the microphone?
I think I've spoken too much already,
Okay,
but
then we'll move on, and Jan, to you then. One intervention on this point.
I just want to come in on Ambassador Blake's remarks on the Afghan-Russian relationship. I think the whole history, the world knows that what we have gone through it with them, but time was also right that we should move a little bit forward, and we did so. In the last state visit that President Karzai had to Moscow, I accompanied him, and we had jointly established a commission, Afghan-Russian Commission, which basically, of course, the political issues, those will be part of it, but most focused issues were on the economic front, and particularly on the infrastructure front. They have promised us, both in terms of monetary as well as physically, as well as technically, to assist Afghanistan in those particular programs and projects which Russia had already built. For example, the Salung Tunnel and the cement factory and many others, something like that. So we have started a very developing more close relationship. And of course, in this regard, we have been very close to our partners and friends, Americans. I do recall that at the state dinner, which we hosted, Vice President Biden was asked that we are going to Moscow. He said, by all means, please go and, build close relationship. So we are continuing on that path. Thank you.
Do you want to say anything on the Russia and
No,
China aspect?
just only one point which was on this, the TEPI, which was regarding its security. And I think Ambassador Blake has already answered that question. But in the initial discussion also we mentioned that when you talk about the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India gas pipeline, that certainly there have to be a certain level of the security where you can actually start laying it. But even once it is there, which will generate a lot many jobs and of course intensive incentives to the people to join into the economic building of the countries rather than getting into the other activities, the security of course will be responsibility of the national governments from wherever it passes. So I think that's very clear. At this point nobody has raised this question, but once the pipeline is there, it will be there only once the security situation in Afghanistan comes to a level where you can trust that, and then, of course, every country will be responsible for its security.
Thank you, sir. These questions.
Yeah, some of them might have a relevance for what I am doing in Afghanistan. Still, perhaps on security, indeed, I can just confirm. Whenever there was a discussion about TAPE, and I somehow, for many years, even before coming to Afghanistan, have been maybe tangentially, but nevertheless engaged and involved in this. Security was a question, but not in a sense as presented now. There is somehow a good understanding that there are ways how to ensure a secure environment specifically for TAPI. So at this point of time, indeed, that's not a major issue on the agenda. There were many other issues, and at this point of time, it's indeed the creation of the consortium as such.
Yeah, the financing is not in place.
consortium of those that would like to provide financing. But it's true that this is again under discussion, and they are going through one milestone to another. At this point of time, the roadshow indeed might have brought already some new breakthroughs, hopefully. There was also a question about implementation, and indeed, that's a fact of life, that there are many good projects around. Countries agreed, many organizations, they have meetings, and they developed a portfolio of projects, tens, maybe hundreds of them. Some of them excellent, some of them just wishful thinking, I have to say. But nevertheless, there are plenty of them. It's also something that I would like to stress. Many of them are being implemented with excellent results. The railway linking Uzbekistan with Afghanistan to Mazari that created, was financed by IDB and created major development, not only opportunities, but already benefits. It's working. And then all the invoked projects concerning, for example, border crossing procedures, the best practices that shortened the time of passage of goods through the border at least twice, if I'm not wrong, in comparison with the previous situation. All that is happening. Is it enough? Definitely not. What is happening? First, Tokyo is a very important conference, and I would never underestimate the agreements that were concluded there, the Mutual Accountability Framework Agreement. That's a compact between Afghanistan and partners of Afghanistan with obligations on both sides. Yes, there is a way forward. Yes, many of the things are just in the pipeline, but there is a progress, even the fact that they are in the pipeline. Because what happened, and again, it's not for me perhaps, but to confirm that the government of Afghanistan prepared action plans for all the areas in the Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework. Not only the decree of Mr. President, rather ambitious, if I may say, rather ambitious, but concrete action plans. It's now for the donors to prepare similar action plans, frankly. The international community is lagging a little bit behind. And let's see how the international community will be up to the task. But nevertheless, things are happening. But I would like to recall what was in the Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework, because that's crucial for future, for sustainability of the commitment already given to Afghanistan. And none of the areas is something that you can just tick off by an action plan. There are 5 areas in the framework. Representational democracy and equitable elections. 2, governance, rule of law and human rights. 3, integrity of public finance and commercial banking. 4, government revenues, budget execution and subnational governance. And 5th, inclusive and sustained growth. I said something about the election. We are moving forward, Afghanistan is moving forward, and I'm at this point of time, I'm hopeful, right? But for the rest, we have a major homework ahead of us. A major governance is a major issue, fighting corruption. Subnational governance, go to provinces of Afghanistan. You will hear many points what should be done much better, to say it very mildly and diplomatically, under the gaze of all of my international colleagues. There are so many complaints towards the central government. You cannot imagine. You cannot imagine. It's a major homework ahead. Capacity, I agree, capacity is there, incomparable. Is it sufficient for the tasks? This is one of the areas of risks. We know it. The Afghan government knows it. One of the risk areas, capacity, after notably 2014, right? And there are many other budget execution, frankly speaking about integrity of public finances, etc. Where is the banking law? Without good banking law, there will be problems. speaking about sustainable growth, and we had a lot of words about potential of Afghanistan, extraction, etc. Where is the mining law that would provide for equal playground and predictability, transparency in the area from the point of view of future investment? Even the biggest investors now, China, India, they have a lot of question marks. In real practical terms, although that's a positive sign, by the way. It's one of the things that I, again, would like to highlight. These people, I mean these two countries, and Turkey, and some others, they are coming with real investment now. They don't speculate about security conditions 2, 3, 4 years from now. They are voting by their foot. They are coming to Afghanistan. This is a very important factor. Don't forget, let's not forget about this very important factor.
They are government-backed and government-insured.
I agree. I agree. They are following the flag. Well, in many important projects around the world, commerce follows the flag. So this is nothing wrong about this. With this Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework, with the implementation of what was agreed, you will have private investors coming. But they need certain environment, and we are speaking about the environment. My last point, and I can speak a lot, that's why I was happy that there are other questions to other colleagues. My last point is about, in response to the question, what is the new political agenda for Afghanistan? I don't understand the question. We have the political agenda together with Afghanistan. We are in this process. It's simple. It's Chicago, it's Tokyo, it's all the plans of the government. It's the election, it's whatever, it was not mentioned, by the way, here, whatever might happen with peace and reconciliation. You know, it's regional cooperation, etc. This is the political agenda with so many benchmarks. We need to implement this. We have the roadmap for the coming 2 years to 10 years, 15 years. We know what to do, let's do it. Thank you.
Did you want to come in on a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to underline what Ambassador Kubish said, just with a specific example, which is I was in Afghanistan about 2 weeks ago and had the privilege of going up to northern Afghanistan to Balkh province. I was going up there primarily to go visit the border crossing at Haratan with Uzbekistan, but I had a chance to meet with investors and so forth in Mazar-e-Sharif, and it was very instructive because there's a lot of economic activity going on in Balkh province now, and so you have to ask yourself why, and I think it's an interesting proof of concept. One is that there's good governance at the local level. Governor Atta and his team have made a pretty good effort on that. Secondly, there's good security, which has helped, and that's partly related to good governance. And I think third, and also important, is this regional infrastructure that already exists. So there's not only the rail line that goes into Uzbekistan, but there's also road crossings into Tajikistan through Sher Khan. And so those also provide opportunities for local business. And so as a result of that, you see quite a lot of economic activity, but also I was struck that the business community, the local business community, saw a lot of other opportunities to be developed, provided security can be assured, and crucially, what Ambassador Kubish said, provided that good governance can be maintained and that there's an election. Afghan after Afghan told me that it's going to be extremely important for there to be credible, open, transparent elections that will ensure, the future support of the Afghan people for their government.
Thank you very much. Would you like to add anything to these issues? Most of them concern your agenda.
I think a number of issues which Ambassador Kubish mentioned, particularly on the Tokyo Mutual Agreement. Yes, we have taken this extremely seriously. You are very correct on that part. As a matter of fact, we have devoted, if I recall, good 2 solid sessions at the cabinet level. And the paper which was presented, which we prepared it, how to implement and abide by it, has discussed in a very greater detail and thoroughly. Naturally, I needed to say, Afghanistan, what has gone through it, you cannot expect that in 1 decade we will reach to a point where everybody will say, bravo, you don't need any more help. No, we are in that stage. We are building and then going forward. So the Tokyo Mutual Framework Agreement, we have worked quite a bit on that. As a matter of fact, we have been discussing on the whole process of the JCMB process and so on, how to go about it, and we are in regular contact, so that will continue. On the other things which you said, for example, building a legal infrastructure, i.e. laws and so on. Yes, again, we do have, for example, the laws of the mining. We do have investments laws, and we have all those laws available, but of course, this was done in earlier governments. But now, the cabinet has already discussed these drafts, which are already on our table. As a matter of fact, it's not only one law of mining and so on, but there are many, many other laws. It is taking a little time of the turn. We have basically, the cabinet has, a lot of them have cleared it. It's just going through the parliament and ratification part. So that's on the, what we call it, on the line. So it will get to it in a due course. Capacity after 2014, well, as I already earlier mentioned, to the best of our own ability and the resources available, I think we are ready for it, very much so. The President is fully committed, and the cabinet as well as the government. Naturally, we will have ups and downs at some point, but if that happens, well, here you are, Ambassador Kubis, from your previous experiences of transition, we will call upon you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the floor? Please. If not, I'd like to pursue just a little bit. Jim.
Yes, sir. I had one other question in particular to the elections. Experience in 2009 was a pretty complex environment in a lot of violence at the polling sites. Then my experience in 2010 was much better at the polling sites, but a lot of influence on the Independent Election Commission at the Kabul level, with a lot of support pulling out in terms of helicopters and vehicles and reaction forces and that type of thing. How do you foresee the elections going in terms of, one, preventing some of the corruption at the polling sites, two, the influence of the Independent Election Commission post-election, post the actual election, and then three, support to the Election Commission in terms of getting the ballots into the Hindu Kush by donkey or however else they do it. I'm just curious on how you see that working. Over.
Do you want to have a word on?
I'd be glad to.
Yeah.
Very rightly so, one learns from the experiences, naturally. Our first experience of the elections was a little bit maybe difficult. Second was much better, and hopefully third would be. Just 3 weeks ago, we had a specific session of the cabinet, special session was devoted on these elections, whereby the head of the Elections Commission, plus with his whole team, came up with the entire plan, how to go about it to the distant corner of the country, and how will we go about it, as you rightly said, on the horses, on the buggies, and whatever we can do so. As far as we are concerned, we are ready for it. Of course, we will need some resources for it to make it happen, which I think as commitment is there from Mr. Kubias already, but we will continue to do so. Naturally, there will be little ups and downs. That is almost everywhere in the world the elections comes in, but it will be very minimal.
Yes, I would very much like to pursue this and then come back on a few other practical questions. What is written in reports and newspapers is not always what is actually happening on the ground, because they only see it ex post facto. It's sort of like, forward driving, looking in your rear guard mirror. It doesn't really gel with the reality, but nevertheless, there are some really serious questions on the election process and on the prevention of fraud in that election process, particularly where, let's say, that the real arm of governance doesn't always reach. So I'd be very pleased to hear how you and the UN and your mandate is helping to prepare, because it's a critical watershed moment. And if it doesn't go right, then a lot of the things we've been talking about in the international community are not going to be believable. Turn it over to you, Jan.
Only a couple of points. First of all, we heard about free, fair, transparent elections, etc. But I believe that it would be much more correct to say that we expect and hope very much that the election will be better than the previous ones, will be more credible than the previous ones. We would like to be as ambitious as possible. But we have to also understand what are the realities, including realities on the ground. So better, more credible, with a result that is much more accepted by the majority of the people in Afghanistan. Last time, it was quite a messy situation. The international community, including the United Nations, we were all accused, partly rightly, of interfering into the process. Not necessarily supporting, but interfering into the process. This time, this is one of the red lines of the government, very clearly. And I heard it at every meeting in my past 10 months in the country that I had with Mr. President and other members of the administration, but frankly, also from the civil society, although sometimes their interpretation is slightly different from what is interference and what is assistance, even needed assistance. At this point of time, I cannot give you any precise response to the question what kind of anti-fraud measures, for example, will be adopted, because this plan is just being developed by the Independent Electoral Commission. They will be discussing all of this with, of course, with the authorities of the country, but also with us, with the international community, because no doubt they will come to us with a request to provide support. This is my role, this is my mandate, to provide support at the request of the authorities and institutions of the country for the election.
Is there any difficulty between the Independent Commission and the Supreme Court on this?
Well, we'll see. At this point of time, this is a very specific question. There were difficulties before, and I see that, of course, you are referring to the points from the ICG report. By the way, that report was a good one as far as the factography is concerned. And I disagree, and I have to say I disagree with the conclusions. The country inevitably will go to chaos and civil war. Sorry.
It won't.
Sorry. This is not necessarily what's going to happen. There are many that are working against this, first of all the government, but civil society, political forces, and us as well. So I accept a number of points from the report. From the analytical point of view, I disagree with the conclusions. Still, and one point that I would like to make, I hope very much that the ICG will be allowed to continue to work in the country, because it's a respectable international body, might have disagreements with conclusions, and what? It's normal. This is an analytical body. They have the right to look at the situation, analyze, come with their own conclusions to be then questioned. So coming back to your question, yes, it's simply the authorities, the institutions, the respective institution is the Independent Electoral Commission. They are preparing now the plan, an election plan, and should be hopefully finalizing at least a draft of this plan rather soon. There will be a needs assessment mission sent by the United Nations to the country to assess both the quality of the preparations and measures to be taken, among others, to address the issue of previous of frauds as we witnessed last time. And hopefully then we will be able to design a way how to support the country in the election. With regard to security, our ISAF colleagues, doesn't matter the withdrawal, they are already thinking, maybe cannot say planning, because frankly I don't see into their kitchen, but I know that they are thinking very seriously, and military planners are looking into that, what kind of support will be needed to support the Afghan national authorities, including the Afghan national security forces, but not only, for the election 2014. And they are planning already, as I said. So the plans will be fixed later, but the withdrawal doesn't mean the withdrawal of the support for the election. We'll come back to you whenever more clarity will be available. Thank you very much.
Now, I'd like to use some of the rest of our time to look a little bit more into what our title is all about on economic security. And here is the problem. Elections have never secured the viability of a country. And it is not in Afghanistan that I put that question. All of us here are living in the heart of Europe. And in the heart of Europe, the Balkans fell apart into a mess, as you all know, and I don't have to. Ambassador Verbo is not here, but obviously NATO was deeply implicated in trying to undo this mess that was created. However, a lot of elections took place, a lot of supervision of the elections took place. These are small countries, it was easy to do. You would have thought that those elections would have arrived in many of the countries that broke up in the Balkans to some kind of, let us say, strengthening of institutions that are democratic. In the beginning, they did not. It was an elections in the void. They were not elections underpinned by a strong, which you're trying to do now, strong building of institutions, a lesson that I think we have all learned. One of the difficulties that came out was why you have an election and you don't have the institutions that support a democracy that should come from an election. We have now learned that you need to precede the election with a lot of this work. It is the same in the economic field, and I'd like to turn to you on economic security. Countries are born with good elections, with a flag, and above all, a dot on the internet. They have to get their name passed through ISO. And then they're born. And they exist with a name and a flag and all the rest of it, and especially, as I say, an internet connectivity. But that doesn't mean that they're economically viable. And I still have some question here as I've seen it played out in several countries. And here's some of the questions. First of all, a highly agriculturally dependent, rural dependent, let's put it this way, country, with some needs for urbanization or conglomeration, some jobs that are non-farm, non-agricultural jobs, and where a problem that happened in the Balkans I see happening very much in Afghanistan. And that is, while the international community is there, it sucks off the human marketplace some of the very best minds, capacities, and capabilities. And they are used right now and paid for in a lot of the international, not only the governmental, the intergovernmental, but also the NGO world. And on top of it, they're paid salaries that are commensurate with the NGO world, Oxfam, the government and intergovernment. They're not going to pay lower wages, they pay good wages. Now, as that slowly withdraws as being the major employer, and you move into the competitive private sector and the need not just for inward investment, but the retention of capital within the country to start new wealth creation. My question to you is, that's a really hard transition. We haven't yet done it in the Balkans. They're still, in many places, totally unviable and totally, unfortunately, skewed in their financial and salary base, with many people leaving as a result. So the question I have to you is, they're not that many years ahead, and it takes a long time to build up a viable economy. It's not done overnight. What kind of steps do you foresee to prevent, let's say, the difficulties that we have witnessed everywhere in the world from countries that have transited, whether it's in Africa or in the Balkans or anywhere else, and that have come to a point where they're not going to have the same level of international aid to maintain a viable economy. What is happening in this respect?
In matter of fact, you did answer already your question in your remarks as well. What is happening in Afghanistan since past, say, 10 years, yes, whatever little capacity we had in the youth in terms of linguistic as well as the intellectual, naturally they were attracted more by salaries, by international organizations, or for that matter, international NGOs and so on. But that was the phase that we went through it already, and we are still going in many ways. But at the same time, one of the top priority on the president's agenda is the civil service reform, which I'm working with him very closely on that part. What he likes to do is, and this is what we are continuing, to build up a viable civil service right from the beginning. Let's say the university graduates, whatever, we have around 200,000, for example. We take whatever we can and train them and continue with that, but with a proper salary structure, which may not be competing with the international salaries and so on, but at least the job security, other benefits which comes in. And in this regard, we just took a couple of trips to India and then Pakistan to meet their civil service sort of officials and so on. So that is number one priority, which we are doing it. We're working on it, and a lot of laws have been passed in this regard, and commissions have been set up on that part. So that is one area which we are working toward that part. Secondly, as I earlier mentioned, agricultural is our mainstay, and we are very much focusing on that part. Thirdly, the exploration of the mines. I very rightly said so, it takes time. You cannot take the copper, or for that matter, iron on the horses and on the trucks. So we need a viable transport system. Railways, for example. Today, railway is functioning between Mazar-e-Sharif and the north. Today, we are only 20 kilometers away in Herat. Just a small portion is remaining to connect us to the west, for example, to the entire Europe. And of course, we are working on the Chaman and the Quetta side, on the Torkham side with Pakistan, for example. But the road network, which is already there, is quite a bit developed, and now the industry is working on that part. So that is the next focus we have, which will take time, but of course we are working toward that goal. And then fourthly, investments. There, as you rightly said, Ambassador Blank, there's and Ambassador Kubias, that there's a quite interest by the foreigners now to come to Afghanistan. I always tell them when they come to my office, I said, well, if you want to invest in Afghanistan, you have to understand a very simple theory of economics. The risk, the reward curves are always parallel. You want to take a risk, then your reward is also the same way. Otherwise, go to Zug in Switzerland to invest there. You can get 0.whatever% on your income.
It's a negative.
So that's negative, right? So that you have it there, but the interest is quite a bit there. And another thing is also the trade which is now developing between the region as a transit hub. We are hopefully one day we are ready to be happy to say one day that we are earning so much of hundreds of millions of dollars on our transit fees, but that is not far away for us. That would be another way of for example, we are working toward that goal as well. And of course, the interests of the region itself is quite a bit now in Afghanistan, notably India, for example, notably Pakistan. How much investments are coming up now in the development of trade, manufacturing, maybe a little bit in a lower level manufacturing, but it has started in that. Yes, it will take us a time. Balkan's example was very simple, but Afghanistan has survived since the birth of it, and I think will continue to do so, but this time much better in terms of living standards and so on.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming towards the end of our session, and I'm going to ask our panelists, our four panelists who have remained with us through this, just in our last round, to do something that's totally unfair. Instead of analyzing the situation, which we've been doing a lot of, and some hopeful thinking as well, I'd like each of you to perhaps focus, if you would, on 2 or 3 actions that you think are absolutely indispensable, you would like to see happen, in fact, that you would focus on as a major imperative, not only for Afghanistan but for the region. They may not be underway yet, or they may be, it doesn't matter to me, but I think if we have your thinking, all of you, on 2 or 3 major issues, major actions that you would like to see take place, that would be very interesting for all of us to hear. Ambassador Bathija, let's begin with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the concluding remarks are always very important. You see, we in Pakistan, we feel that the goal of long-term stability in Afghanistan, it requires a holistic approach and inclusive approach. Now, what that means is that we have already spoken about, there was the security surge, and of course now that situation is changing by 2014. We already have the Tokyo commitments, about 16 billion or so. We hope they are fully materialized with what the Afghan compact is. But in the long term, certainly then Afghanistan will have to achieve what you call the fiscal sustainability. That will be a very major question over there. But how you achieve that fiscal, the sustainability? Because there are some of the issues which we haven't discussed during the session today. The first and foremost, of course, is that how the issues like the narcotics, they are playing a havoc with the social fabric and in the broader regional sort of a thing, and how they are feeding into the terrorism and all these things and creating insecurity in the broader region, how we address this issue. Attached with that would be that Afghanistan at the moment has almost 4 million plus people who are living outside the borders of the country. We have 1.7 million of refugees who are registered with the UN. We have another million plus who are otherwise in Pakistan. We have about, I think, 800,000 or 900,000 people who are in Iran, and there are small concentration in other countries. Unless the situation is so that all those people go back and decide to go back and participate and help the nation building process, we won't be able to say honestly that this is the Afghanistan has fully returned to a normal situation. And unless it becomes a collective national effort, I think it will not be possible to go in a sense where you can go for a nation building whole this process. These are some of the issues I think.
Those are 3 big ones that you brought up. So.
These are the issues which we have looked into it, and I think the key to that would be that how you are able to have the political surge in Afghanistan, because unless the Afghans, they have the intra-Afghan, some sort of a consensus on a bare minimum, then the rest outside we can just pray and we are there to help. But it is the Afghans, it's their call. Any initiative have to come to them. Okay. And we sitting in the neighborhood can assure you nothing will succeed unless it is made in Kabul. We are sure about it.
Thank you very much. I turn to you, Jan. What would be your 2 or 3 or actions that you would like to see undertaken?
Why not 200, frankly? Sorry, but...
We'll concentrate on 2 or 3.
Okay, I'll give you tangible
really?
Things that can be delivered. I mentioned some of them.
Yeah.
On the political side, and we speak about political transition, it's not necessarily only the election, but the election is the backbone of political transition. Adopt the election law, adopt the election structure law. It means prerogatives of the main institutions that are dealing with the election. Election Commission and Election Complaints Commission. That's first block. The second block, I mentioned them. Transparency, good investment climate. Adopt the banking law, adopt the mining law, modernized, future-oriented. Deliver this, would be fine. It's within the reach. On the human rights side, we didn't talk about human rights, and it's a major concern. Do much better in implementation of the law on eliminating violence against women. It's a crucial thing that will say a lot about the whole system and how the country is approaching not only the specific area of human rights or women's rights, but basically it's about justice and rule of law. Try to do this, possible. And the fourth point that I am going to make, finalize in good time, preferably sooner than later, the bilateral security agreement between the United States and Afghanistan that will finalize or conclude the process of negotiating the strategic partnership agreement between Afghanistan and the United States. I'm saying it very clearly, finalize negotiation. I will not speculate about the outcome.
Just finalize negotiations.
But the outcome will deliver, I would say, a very major building block and predictability, this way or that way. Thank you.
I assume, Ambassador Blake, that that would be high on your list of actions?
Yeah, I guess I better comment on that, huh? Yeah, I'd say definitely that security is extremely important in Afghanistan, and as Ambassador Kudru said, we're just now about to start our bilateral security agreement negotiations. We've given ourselves a year to complete that. We hope we can do it even sooner than that. But, and I have to stress, this is a bilateral negotiation because Afghanistan must agree to everything that we're seeking and vice versa. So that will be important. I would make a couple of other just comments. We feel that there has been good progress and that there's good momentum towards creating a secure and stable Afghanistan going forward. But there's going to have to be some important things. I think the international community has spoken through the Chicago NATO summit, through the Tokyo framework, that it is committed to this transformation decade from 2014 to 2024. But I'd just like to come back to what Ambassador Kubish said about the mutual accountability, because I think that's extremely important to maintaining this momentum. And that'll be not just ensuring free, fair, and open elections, but also, very importantly, addressing some of the governance and corruption issues, and also creating a predictable and, again, transparent legal environment for these investments to take place. That will be very, very important. The laws that the ambassador talked about, but again, some of these very important, crucial governance issues that will reassure international investors and help raise Afghanistan from really, it's close to the bottom now in terms of the World Bank indicators of doing business. So I think all of those will be very, very important to the future.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Blake. And we'll finish our session with you, sir. If you must have a list, an agenda list of thousands of things that you want to happen. But if you could just give us the ones that you think are absolutely critical to make your country a strong and viable international and regional partner.
Much has been said by, by my colleagues here. These are all beautiful and noble thoughts, and I will continue to build upon it. For me, the most important thing is, of course, economic stability, economic growth, raising the standards of people of Afghanistan, providing them simple shelter, food, and lodging, for example. That is couple of things that we ought to do it. And that, I think, given the today's session's theme of regional cooperation, I think we can do so with the help of our neighbors, our region, and so on. I like to see Afghanistan take advantage, change the landlockedness in which we are in to our benefit and unlock ourselves. That's my vision. By doing so, if we can change this status of landlocked, which all the time is dragging everybody, low, I like to unlock it to develop Afghanistan as a trade, transit, transport, and investment hub, which not only will serve Afghanistan, but it will serve the entire region. Secondly, I also like to see the investments of the region come in, the technical know-how come in of our neighbors, of Pakistan, of India and Iran and all of them. This will help us. We like to build, as the President Karzai occasionally has said it, Afghanistan with the help of region, and we like to be a contributor to it. And also we like to be an interlocutor in this area. Well, I hope we will continue on this path. That's our vision.
Thank you very much, sir, and I would like to ask all of you to give a big hand to this absolutely extraordinary and extremely distinguished panel. This has been, as far as I'm concerned, a fascinating, important, and significant discussion. Thank you all very much.